talk to the Fort Lee community. I have a lot of information that I'd like to share with you, but just a few words about myself. Once again, my name is Michelle Perchuk. I'm the founder of MTV Coaching, and I do full-time career coaching, resume advisory, cover letter advisory, interview tactics, and networking coaching. So without further ado, we could start my presentation about how to create remarkable resumes to get noticed in this competitive marketplace. Carrie? Next slide, please. So creating a remarkable resume basically happens in a couple of steps. And is that the first slide? I'm not sure that's the first slide.
This is slide 1.
Okay.
This is slide 2.
Okay, got it. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today is the actual format of the resume, the do's and don'ts, what to include to make sure that you stand out from all the competition, the thousands of resumes that come in per job, how you learn how to write a great resume. I'll touch upon what happens after you send it, how you could follow up, and how to identify the next steps. Next slide, please. The purpose of the resume, I'm sure everyone knows that when you're applying for jobs, you send in a resume, but here are some things that you could also start thinking about. It's to really introduce yourself to a potential employer. It's to present your qualifications and your experience. The key is to try to secure an interview after they see your resume, to showcase your education, your achievement, your skills, to differentiate yourself from other resumes that are being submitted for the same job. And it's to show the employer that you are the best fit for the job, even if you don't have 100% of the skills that they're asking for. So this is a topic that is very important, and I will revisit that later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Components and sections of the resume. Many of these things will be very familiar to you, but maybe you'll pick up some additional information. So your name, the name that you're known by, not your actual legal name, your contact information, your LinkedIn profile, and the city and state that you're located in. Many people actually put either their legal name, their full legal name. They also put their home address. And I advise you not to do that, because with a lot of identity theft around and, cybersecurity, it's always a good idea to not put this information on a piece of paper that you're really not sure who's going to be looking at it. So a summary is extremely important. It should be a powerful, this PowerPoint, yeah. It should be a powerful one paragraph that will introduce you to a potential employer. Many people overlook the importance of putting an objective. I recommend that you put an objective and make sure that objective matches the job that you're applying to. And then making sure that it's not vague. So it could be something like looking for a job in a hotel in hospitality. Looking for a job in hospitality doing what? Management, customer support, customer representative. Just try to be as specific in the objective, because once again, you're not sure who's looking at the resume. And if they're not sure what job you're applying for, they're going to toss it. So it's very important to have the objective match the job description. List your education, the highest degrees that you have, any awards, any honors you've received, any publications where you were mentioned or maybe you published. A good set of skills, probably your top 5 to 8. I always like to mirror the skills that you could include on LinkedIn, and get into your experience. Many people do include references and hobbies. That's kind of old-fashioned. If they want references, they'll get back to you after the interview, but putting references available upon request, it wastes a line on the resume, and it's kind of understandable. Next slide, please. Formatting. So I've put together some really clear steps on what you could implement regarding formatting. Keeping it simple and modern is very important. Many people do not update their resumes for years, and when they submit it, recruiters know that they haven't updated their resume for years. And the number one indication of how you could show people that you've recently updated is by using a modern font. So I recommend using Calibri or Gramond and using the size 10 to 12 to give you the most space on the page. Highlight your most important achievements on page 1. A resume is like real estate, so put all of your important stuff on the first page. Spacing is also important, and those are my recommendations in order to capitalize every inch on the page. Make sure your resume is crystal clear and easy to read, so the person that's getting the resume doesn't have to do any guesswork. Sometimes an admin is looking at your resume, and you want to make sure that they pass it on to the supervisor. And whenever you're doing the resume, make sure that it's in 1 tense. You speak to yourself either in first person or in third person. Make sure it's consistent. And you load it up with action verbs and not the usual ones like created, acknowledged, and taught, or was responsible, but use your thesaurus to look up more interesting words and use those. Lastly, make sure it's ATS compatible. Many of you may not know what ATS stands for. It's Applicant Tracking System, and it's a system that sits on top of every single website or job board, and its job is to collect resumes. But if your resume is not ATS friendly, it will not transcribe correctly, and it will come in as actually gibberish on the other end. So there are some things that I'm going to address later on in the presentation about the do's and don'ts. I usually recommend to not use fancy formatting, to not use fancy characters, to not include your photo, so that the resume will transcribe smoothly. The most standard way is to send a Word document or a PDF. Next slide, please. Your experience section should not go back further than 15 years. If you could stay closer to the 10, that would be great. That's going to make your resume concise. And it's also going to show that your experience relates to the current job. Everything that's been done 15 years ago has evolved so much that it almost doesn't matter anymore. This is where your transferable skills come in. Really load up these words. I did a lot of research before I came up with these words, and these are very important because I surveyed easily over 2,000 jobs before I found these common denominators. And the way to remember them are 3 C's, 2 T's, and 1 L. So load up your resume with communication, collaboration, creativity, technical, teamwork, and leadership. And be ready to show how you have done those things in your job or jobs. Absolutely highlight the technology competency that you have, the technical competency, because every single job today requires you to be user-friendly with technology. I'm not asking you to write code, but kind of employers expect a person to understand how to have a backup at home if their Wi-Fi is not working, or someone to put together a PowerPoint presentation. So if you're applying for modern jobs, make sure that you put down that you feel very comfortable with technology, you're set up to work from home, and you, even if you don't know a certain software, you're savvy enough to figure it out. And once again, always link your education, your honors, and your achievements back to the actual objective and to the actual job that you're applying for. Next slide, please. What are transferable skills? These are skills that show an employer that you can do the job even though you're not 100% match. These skills highlight your potential. In essence, No one is ever perfect 100% for the job. There's always something that an employer is looking for, which is a nice to have, and they could always make up that you don't have it. So the key is to show them, even if you are a stretch for a job, you will be that person who will be the best employee, you'll be the fastest learner, you'll collaborate the best, you'll communicate the best, and all of those transferable skills. So these are competencies that show an employer that you will be an asset. Besides, skills go out of style. The skills that you needed 5 years ago are really not applicable today. Think about the photocopying machine or the Xerox machine. No one puts that on their resume anymore. Or if someone types 60 minutes, 60 words per minute. So you may have those skills, but they're not applicable anymore today. So you have to mention that you have competencies that will line you up with the skills that the employer needs. Transferable skills highlight your agility, how quickly you adapt to new situations. I think during COVID, everybody saw how important technology is and how quickly we need to adapt to use technology in our jobs. You also have to be able to demonstrate your flexibility, that you're going to be able to pick up and very comfortably set up a home office and work from home. Not many people were able to make that transition. And this is through the transferable skills. This is a great place to mention how you've adapted during the actual pandemic and how you've grown. So if you weren't that great with technology, how you went far and beyond to pick up skills that allowed you to be more friendly with technology. Next slide, please. This is the slide that I spoke about earlier, about the do's and don'ts of what to put in your resume and what not to. So do use a basic format that will be easy to read. Do include transferable skills and action verbs. Do tailor the resume to fit every job description. I'm not asking you to write a brand new resume for every job, but if you have 3 or 4 different versions based on the job that you're applying to, you could basically plug in a different version. Use a modern font that I spoke about in the previous slide. Don't have unexplained gaps in your resume. I'll touch upon that point in a minute. Don't use photos, fancy characters. Don't abbreviate or use slang. Don't use narrative style. Don't list references and hobbies, and definitely do not send a resume and wait. Definitely follow up. So what I mean about unexplained gaps, if anyone has close to a 1-year gap on your resume, there's no point in covering it up. You might as well just own it and talk about it in your cover letter, but definitely put something there that will fill in the gap that is either a humanitarian effort, if you enrolled in some kind of certification class, if you took the time to take some online courses. It's understandable that not everybody was able to spring back and get a job over COVID, but making that, what I'm trying to say is not including what you did during this time is definitely can be viewed as a mistake. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions about that. You could put that in chat. Okay, no questions. We could proceed. Next slide, please.
There is one question.
Oh, great.
Will this PowerPoint be made available to participants?
No, it will not be, but there's going to be, it will be available on the YouTube channel. Is that right, Carrie?
Yes, this session is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel later this week.
Fantastic. Okay, next slide, please. If you have any particular question that is very particular to you, my contact information is behind me in my virtual background. You could always reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I could be helpful in answering that question. So here's a slide that I put together, which is kind of a rule of thumb on length, because many people ask me, is it okay to have a 4-page resume? Sure, it's okay, but you know, definitely I have to say that all 4 pages will not be read. So it's very important for you to understand that, putting everything under the sun on your resume is wonderful, but it's only wonderful for you. They're not going to read it. Okay. And I spent close to 20 years in the recruiting field, and I've read hundreds and thousands of resumes. And I'll tell you, I rarely went beyond the first page. So for recent college graduates and for students, 1 page. I don't care if you went to Oxford and you won a scholarship, doesn't matter. For students, it's very applicable to have a 1-page resume. For professionals, 2 pages is enough to showcase their achievements, their experience, with the right margins and the right spacing. I only recommend for you to go to 3 pages if, let's say, you are in a profession where there's a lot of grants, or you've been published a lot, you're an author, or even if you're a creative and you have almost like a portfolio and you almost need a page to highlight to an employer your work and samples of your work, then I would go to 3 pages. And in those cases, I would even recommend having a personal website that will house all of that. If you're a creative, it's very impressive when you have a personal website, and today you could build it yourself. It's not that hard. Next page, please. Here are some action verbs. So on the left, you'll see those transferable skills that I speak about, the 3 C's, the 2 T's, and the 1 L. And here are examples of action verbs that you could use to replace and not use collaborate 5 times on your resume. So instead of saying collaborate, you could say navigated. Instead of saying create, you could say illustrated or authored, communicate, maximize, enhance, and so forth. It'll make your resume more entertaining when they read it. And, the rule that I talk about is if you're doing this on the resume, then probably everybody else is. And if they're looking at your resume and it's like everybody else's, they're going to toss it. But if your resume is interesting, they'll read it. It's like, those essays we used to write in college. If the thesis statement is not interesting, you probably will not grab the reader. So the same thing goes with the resume. Next slide, please. Objective. An objective, once again, is extremely important to have on a resume, and it goes right below the summary. The objective needs to match the job title. It has to be clear and to the point. Avoid using broad terms like a position in business development. List your industry and even go as far as location. So if there is no physical location in your profession, then you could basically say would even be available for remote work. Be specific in what you're trying to say. And a good idea, like I mentioned before, is to have several versions of your resume that have different objectives. So you just grab that resume and plug it in. Either you're emailing it to somebody or you're applying online. Next slide, please. What to do after you send the resume. So definitely avoid sending it and then sitting back and waiting. I know people that send 20, 30 resumes a day and they never hear anything back. So don't set yourself up for the disappointment. The chances that you will submit through a job board and hear something immediately, or even get a job that maybe you would be satisfied with, is very, very low. So my suggestion is be proactive and follow up. When you submit your resume to job boards, there's usually no one to follow up with. So if you are well connected on LinkedIn, always do a little bit of research and see who you know at a certain company, and submit your resume actually to a human being, not to a system, so that you could follow up and ask for feedback. And feedback is not criticism. If someone is kind enough to give you feedback, they care. If they wouldn't care, they would just never take your call or your email. But try to get the most feedback because that's going to make you better in your next version of your resume. Invest in networking every single day if you're a job seeker right now. And don't send your resume to people who you don't know. If you send it, try to send it to somebody that you know or get a referral and let them send it to somebody that they know. Be proactive, grow your networks. We have a wonderful tool called LinkedIn now, and I'll talk about it, I think in a few slides. I'm not sure if it's in this presentation, but LinkedIn, many of you know, LinkedIn is a very, very strong tool, especially for people who are in job search right now. And if you've identified the top companies that you want to work in, then I suggest every single day you're reaching out to people in those companies and you build your network. So when you finally do see that job come out on Indeed or on Monster or any of the other job boards, you could ping a couple of your friends at that company and say, hey, by the way, did you hear anything about this job? Can you introduce me to the person that's hiring? Can you help me out and tell me what's going on with this job? Then all of a sudden, you upped your chances by like 100%. When you send a resume cold through a listing, the chances are very low. I mean, that's just the reality. Spend your time wisely and send resumes to jobs with a high probability of being seen. So if you're in a job search right now and you're spending 80% of your time just submitting to boards, I recommend that you reverse it. You spend 80% of your time building relationships and networking, and 20% of your time just sending your resume blindly. Next slide, please. Here's my contact information. I'm located in the Fort Lee area, and I work internationally. All my work is on Zoom. My website is MTV Coaching. My email is michelle@mtvcoaching.com. That's my phone number. You could find me on Instagram, where I share a lot of amazing tips for job seekers about resumes, about networking, about cover letters, about business plans. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a LinkedIn invite. There are videos on YouTube about some of the things that I just spoke about, little mini videos, 2 to 3 minutes each. And I'm very active on Facebook and on Clubhouse. I think that is the end of the presentation. Is that the last slide, Carrie? Yes, thank you very much. At this point, I will take questions. They could be broad questions or they could be specific. Let me just see if this slide has something important. Yeah, we could just read through this together. The job market is changed forever and it's hard, very, very hard to keep up. You need to diversify and do meaningful work. If you're not at work, then participate in a charity or start a side business. I spoke about that before. Stay fulfilled by doing something you love and share your expertise. Attract positive energy and grow your network with meaning. You are more than just your job. Any questions from anyone?
I do see one question in the chat. For college students, should they include GPA on resume?
Yes, if it's a worthy GPA. I would not include anything.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Michelle, are you there?
No, are you there?
Did we lose her?
I think it's she's frozen. I don't know. I lost her.
She's dropped off right now. She's probably going to rejoin. Let's give her a few minutes.
Okay.
Then she'll get back to your question.
All right, thank you.
Could she repeat the GPA question because she kind of cut out right when she said what it was?
Okay, once she re-enters, I'll ask
Okay.
that question, and then Nicole can ask.
Sure, thank you.
I believe she was saying that the GPA can be on the resume as long as it's worthy. But
Right, but she was kind of saying what it should be, so I just kind of wanted to get an idea of what she was thinking.
okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, I'm going to let Michelle back in. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Welcome back. Would you please unmute?
Sorry, everyone.
Where we left off, would you finish your answer about the question about college students including the GPA on the resume? And then Nicole has a question for you.
Sure. So regarding the GPA on the resumes, I highly recommend not including a GPA if it's below 3 or 3.2. You know, definitely include it if you're like on a dean's list. But if you maybe struggled with some subjects, I would not include it. That's for sure. The next question.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I've been working with my job for 20 years and I've had some progression in my career, but I'm at a standstill for the last 5 years. And I have been actively looking to move into the next level. But what I find is that because I've been at my job so long, a lot of the skills that they're looking for, I feel like I don't have the skills yet and I don't feel confident in applying those positions. So, and I kind of missed the beginning, so I wasn't sure like how do
Sure.
I make my resume so appealing if I want to go to a higher level, but I
Okay.
don't have all the skills.
Okay. So I spoke a lot about transferable skills. These are skills that most of us have them. We just need to show how we could apply them to a job that we're not 100% match for. And let me expand. So for example, let's say you are a medical billing person or you are a nurse assistant. And 5 years ago, electronic records was not a thing. Today, it's absolutely a thing. And all medical assistants and billing people need to be very familiar with the systems that do any kind of medical patient data management, and then all the codes and all of that. So if you don't have that, for example, you can't apply for the jobs of today. So the question is, how do you get those? First of all, you need to identify the actual gaps and then figure out where you could go get those skills. So I'm completely making this up. If that was the case and you were a medical practitioner and you needed those skills, you could volunteer in a community center or in a clinic where you could start using that technology and learning about it. You could look up some people in your network or in your school alumni organizations and see if you could sit next to somebody and almost be an apprentice to pick up those skills. So that when you interview for that job, that's kind of a stretch for you. But you could say, look, I never really worked with those skills, but I know that this is a gap. And this is why for the past 3 months, I've been volunteering at my local medical clinic because I want to learn that. See, I was in a hiring position for most of my career. And when a candidate would say this to me, I would be ecstatic because I would have somebody in front of me that is willing to go out of their way, spend their time to learn something new. Now, that is a competency that I would want on my team. To me, that person is more important and more valuable than somebody that just was trained at work and that's it. And those are the competencies that employers look for today, because with COVID and with everybody being at home, a lot of things changed and employers started valuing people that think outside of the box, not the ones that are just being told what to do and that's it. So
Right.
Nicole, does that answer your question a little bit?
No, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. The key is to identify, and this is what I recommend to many of the people that I work with, go online and identify your dream job, like dream a little. What do you want to be? The CEO, the senior VP, whatnot. And then map the skills that you have to that job. If you need help, you could always reach out to me. And though if you don't have those skills, then you better put together a plan to get those skills, because the longer you wait, the further your goal gets away from you. It's like the more you reach towards it, the further it goes away, unless you have a plan in place of how will you acquire those skills.
I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry, I
Yes.
want if anyone else has one.
No, go ahead.
So I appreciate that because I was willing to do that, but I've the kind of industry I work in, I know of people within the department that has the skill, and I don't know how to approach them to say, hey, I just want to learn, because I don't, you know, I mean, I do have an alternative motive because I do want to move and leave, but I do want to learn so that I can at least get something out of it. So I didn't know how to approach that.
Okay, so maybe you could tell me what industry you're in, because then I could really answer the question, with focus.
So I work for Barnes & Noble. It's a retail environment. I work in the call center environment, not in the store. And I'm a senior manager, and I'm looking to get to a director level. But a lot of the positions that I've been looking at, they're looking for a person that has P&L, that's responsible for P&L. And I never had that ability, that ability to work on a P&L. So but there are people within my department that responsible for one, but how do I get to work with them so I can learn it as well?
Got it. So the first call that I would make is to HR to see if they do any kind of tuition reimbursement. The second thing I would ask them is, do you have any online classes that I can participate in? Is there any access to any online learning, any e-learning that you make available to the employees? Barnes & Noble is a pretty big company, because I would like to progress in my role. I would like to acquire skills that will make me better in my role than I am today. Obviously, do not mention to them that you'd like to leave or look at something else. But you say, I've identified that some of my colleagues have the experience with P&L. I would like to acquire that skill. Do you have an e-learning platform that I could use? Do you have tuition reimbursement? I'd like to take a class online. No one is going to sit and teach you per se. But if you have those resources available through your company, now it's a small business, that's different. But a big company like Barnes & Nobles, I guarantee you they do have something.
Yeah,
and if they don't, then they probably have tuition reimbursement. You could take a class at a local college for a couple of $100s. and you'll acquire the skill.
Okay, appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Everyone, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions you have. Turn on your camera too if you're not feeling shy. Do we have any more questions for Michelle tonight?
I guess everyone has awesome resumes. Okay,
Last call? Okay, I guess we're good here. So this recording will go up on YouTube soon. Once I'll probably do it tonight, and I could email it to you guys as well, so you have the link.
sure.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night. Bye-bye.
you.
Good luck with everything. Take care.